Mark III. This is the heaviest launch vehicle that India has right now, although I should point out that paradoxically it's actually shorter than their Polar satellite launch vehicle. But the GSLV Mark III is able to put about 4 tons into geostationary orbit, so obviously they used the biggest thing they could for this moon mission. It has a core that's about 100 tons, and then it has two 200-ton boosters attached to the outside. The core uses a pair of Vicus engines which burn UDMH and dinitrogen tetroxide, and the third stage on top is burning liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Now, they had originally planned to launch this to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11, but they'd had a couple of problems and they pushed back the launch until this morning when I happened to be asleep. In case you don't know, I'm in the process of moving house, which is why my voice sounds more echoey than normal because my studio is being dismantled. But anyway, yeah, the spacecraft launched from Satish Dhawan Space Center, and there's actually some great footage of the solid rocket boosters detaching. See the little rockets on those? We've never seen that in a stream before, so that's pretty cool to get those captured. But anyway, the spacecraft launches into a highly eccentric orbit, very similar to a geostationary transfer orbit. The perigee is about 400 kilometers, and the apogee is out above 30,000 kilometers. So from there, it will use its low thrust to extend that orbit out and eventually capture the moon. Or rather, get captured by the moon. I know India has big plans for the moon, but they are not capturing the moon just yet. This mission is pretty ambitious. Obviously, Chandrayaan-1 was just a lunar orbiter. This one includes an orbiter and a lander, and the lander also has a rover. I'm not sure if the orbiter has a name, but the lander is apparently called Vikram. It's named after, I think it's Vikram Sarabhai, which I probably butchered, but he was widely regarded as the father of the Indian space program, according to Wikipedia. Yes, sometimes I have to do research. The plan is that the lander will touch down just after lunar sunrise because it is solar powered. That gives it roughly 14 days to try and do the science it can using its rover and its onboard instruments. And given that the lunar night is 14 days, it's going to get very cold. There's no guarantee that it will, or expectation even, that it will wake up after that amount of time. But that landing is months away. It's not expected to get into lunar orbit until September. And of course, as Beresheet showed earlier this year, it's not just a case of landing on the moon, but landing slowly enough that you can do some science. Over the Apollo 50th weekend, we also had a Soyuz launch to the space station carrying 3 new crew members: Alexander Skvortsov of Russia, Luca Parmitano from ESA, and Andrew Morgan from NASA. Everything went off according to plan, docking and all that. This was originally going to be the final Soyuz flight with a US crew on board, because NASA at this point was supposed to be switching over to SpaceX and Boeing for crew services. Obviously, as that happened, it hasn't occurred, and SpaceX is still working on their hardware, as is Boeing. Both those flights are now looking increasingly likely to be shifted to 2020, incidentally. We'll get the abort test this year, but it seems that that's been pushed out. Also, SLS sounds like it's being delayed until 2021. And of course, speaking of SpaceX, the Starship Hopper has got a new engine on it and has been doing test firings. This video is of course from Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, who you should check out. He has a really long and detailed video about full flow staged combustion cycle engines, i.e. the Raptor. But yes, the test was pretty spectacular, and then immediately followed by a rather less spectacular fire, which I've heard ended up causing some repairs. The engine is of course still an early model. It has lots of extra test gear and not all of it can handle an extended fire. So the plan to hop the day after the test has been pushed back. Sounds like we might be seeing a hop maybe on Wednesday of this week, but of course everything is in flux. As for the larger Starship prototypes currently under construction in Florida and in Boca Chica, Elon has predicted they might fly in the next 2 to 3 months, so I will say they might fly by the end of the year. I've heard that the Starship prototypes will initially fly with 3 Raptor engines. Ultimately they are designed for 6, but Elon also shared that the Super Heavy booster will have 35 Raptors on it, which would make it the most powerful rocket ever built. Because if you work out about 200 tons per Raptor, that would be 7,000 tons of thrust. Of course, this assumes everything works correctly, and for all we know, Starship Hopper could take off and then go sideways and crash, and then that would be another delay. But, obviously, it's spectacular watching this stuff either way. These are some new renders, by the way, from the official Dear Moon Instagram. I'm going to say, this is something I would love to see made real. This obviously makes the sci-fi person in me very excited. Wednesday the 24th is also the day that SpaceX launches another cargo load to the space station on CRS-18. This will be the third flight for this particular Dragon capsule that's previously gone a couple of times. So yeah, another cool thing to watch next week. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.